You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for being here. Please hit that subscribe button. We are on YouTube. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts. Everywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. Guys, we've got a special podcast for you today, bringing in a close friend of mine, a college football guru, Alan Malae. He'll be joining us shortly. You're going to watch this Tripio sign, which is my company. Got some plugs going on here for those watching on YouTube. You're going to watch it magically vanish and reappear as my STB Sports Take logo, which I have forgotten to put up right now. But anyway, great podcast. Let's hop right to it. All right, and with that, we welcome in our guest today, a dear friend of mine, Alan Malae. Alan, we've been talking about having you on the podcast forever, and we finally are here. Welcome.
Yes, it's good to be here, man.
Dude, first off, right off the bat, I'm noticing behind you a Utah and a BYU helmet. Is that what I'm seeing back there?
Oh man, yeah, these are. So I'm the weird guy that likes both teams, you know.
Okay.
So, but when they play, I'm Utes all the way. But I've had family and friends play for both teams, so it's I'm friends with some of the coaching staff on both at both schools.
Put them back there. We want them in the background. It's nice.
Oh yeah,
nice
all right.
there, yeah.
Let's represent the whole conversation.
Alan is the college football expert. Honestly, nobody knows more about college football, in my opinion, than Alan does. So, Alan, college football is coming up. We're almost to August. August is when it gets really interesting, obviously, and then fall is just the glorious manna from heaven. College football just rains down upon us for several months.
Please.
Let's start right off the bat with Utah and BYU.
Yeah.
First off, I just want to ask, what is your opinion of BYU to the Big 12? And then what's your take on, and what's the latest even on all this realignment? I mean, the SEC and the Big 10, the Big 10's now like the Big 86 or whatever they are.
Big 86.
And then, I mean, they're eventually going to take over the NCAA, it feels like. But then what's your take on the Pac-12 potentially basically just getting rid of everybody? Or I don't know. Give me the latest on all that stuff.
Well, so for your first question, BYU got invited last year to the Big 12.
And I don't think you and I have ever had. I did a full podcast about it, how it's great. I don't think it's, the Big 12 is not going to be as great without Oklahoma and Texas. But anyway, I'll let you have the floor.
The college football landscape has changed so dramatically in the last year, right? Since Oklahoma and Texas left. I mean, that's good for BYU. That's what got them into the Big 12. But if you asked me a month ago what it was like for BYU, I would have said it's fantastic, it's great, and that's all still true, just less.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that in a second. Let's just focusing on the invite and getting in there. I think it's great for BYU. They finally became part of the Power 5. Even if the Big 12 was like the Power 4.5, which is everyone kind of recognized. Okay, they don't have any marquee teams.
Yeah.
They don't have a USC like the Pac-12 does, at least back then. They don't have the Clemsons. They don't have an Ohio State or Michigan. But like nobody was like, oh well, the Big 12 is not good. So I don't know. Bowlesby, the outgoing commissioner, or the previous commissioner, I should say. He lost 4 name brand schools while he was in office. I don't think he was a good commissioner.
No,
he did a hell of a job. You got to give credit to him for bringing in Cincinnati. BYU is the biggest non-Power 5 brand. I think they're one of the biggest brands in college football.
Yeah,
top 30 for sure.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, UCF, like the Big 12 is a good conference on a solid foundation, and that is the opposite of what they were when Oklahoma and Texas left. Yeah. I think considering what's happened in the last month, I think Kliavkov, the commissioner for the Pac-12, made a huge mistake in not trying to poach some of those teams over to the Pac-12. I think they would have come.
So update us, you say the last 2 months, update us. I mean, I've been following, I obviously focus more on NBA, NFL. Sure. I've seen all this craziness with USC leaving and the Big Ten snatching up everybody. There was talks at one point of Utah joining the Big 12. I think that's now squashed, but update all of us on that stuff.
So to kind of finish my point, it's the Big 12 move isn't as awesome as it was a month ago for BYU and for all those other schools, because now since USC and UCLA have joined the Big 10, if you're not in the SEC or the Big 10, there's the Power Five and the Group of Five, and now somewhere in the middle of that is where the Big 12, the Pac-12 live, and they're just kind of floating here.
Yeah,
and they've still got brands. They're still going to get a decent TV deal, but it's going to be light years less than anything that those schools are getting. I mean, we're looking at the Big 10. The Big 10 now, their media rights deals coming up. They're going to get a new TV contract, and they're looking at between 80 to 100 million.
That's insane
per school. Like they're giving out $1 billion every year in TV revenue, and the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are going to be in that $30 to $50 million range. You know what I mean? So, and it's probably for the Pac-12 closer to 30 since USC and UCLA left. And as a Pac-12 fan, it kind of just feels less. What was the coolest thing about being a Utah fan and going to the Pac-12 is now we're not playing Wyoming anymore. We're not playing Air Force or Colorado State. Now we're playing Oregon and USC, and Stanford, back when they were a baller program. But and it just the whole conference seems less. In terms of you got to remind me, what was your last question? The realignment now?
Yeah, you kind of actually touched on it. So the Big 10 now has 16 teams. Is that accurate? I think that's what it is.
Yeah, they've got 16 teams. Powerhouses like Rutgers and Illinois and Purdue. So can I just vent for a second? I gotta vent.
You and I agree on this point. Go ahead.
It's so frustrating because but just by dint of geography, right?
And history, they just grandfathered in.
I mean, what history does Illinois have? I mean,
just the history of having been in that conference for the last 100 years.
But the only reason why they're in it is because of geography. They just happen to be in this area of the country where people care about football a little bit more. Fair enough. But I mean, these super conferences are forming. Rutgers is going to get paid double what BYU and Utah and Oklahoma State are,
unbelievable,
and Oregon, like Rutgers, and you remember when Rutgers joined Maryland too, when they joined the Big 10 back in the day, they were to get that vaunted New York network. New York doesn't care about college football, but I mean, at least you have a presence there. That's back when we thought TV markets were part of expansion, and they are a little bit now, but now it's just about like what revenue can you bring in? It's all about brand. I mean, the most shocking thing about this entire realignment thing is that Oregon is on the outside looking in. I've said for the last 10 to 15 years, there's been teams like Utah break the BCS G5 to P5. They made that transition. TCU is another one. Very few. I mean, there's three. Are those the only two? I can't think of any more off the top of my head that made the jump from G5 to P5. Not only made the jump, but had success. Utah's the Pac-12 champs. TCU under Gary Patterson before he left they were doing pretty great.
Yep.
But I always said no team has gone from obscurity to a brand name, even a blue blood, like Oregon has. Like if you weren't good in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, you weren't anything. You were just you were a college football team. But the teams that were good in that 20-year period, excuse me, they became the blue bloods. They became USC. They became Alabama. Ohio State became Ohio State. Like that was the golden era of college football. That's where when we were growing up in the 90s, when college football kind of became this media juggernaut that it is today, the schools that we were like, oh, wow, Michigan, they became Michigan in the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I always said, and I've never been more wrong, that Oregon had moved into that stratosphere.
Yeah.
They were in that blue blood stratosphere, and Michigan's been middling. Texas is middle. Texas even worse. Better example. They've been middling at best since they won the championship in 2006.
Yeah.
But Oregon's on the outside looking in. I thought they had gotten into the club, and they haven't.
Yeah. What have you heard or read? What do you know about that? Like, why does UCLA get invited, but Oregon doesn't? Like, how does that work?
TV market.
But are there that many? I feel like I watch UCLA and USC games, and there's Rose Bowl, the Coliseum. They're not filling it up usually, unless the team's like on fire that year and they're playing a big opponent. It feels like, so if people aren't even going to the games, like, are there that many fans in Southern California watching? Are there that many fans outside of Southern California that are UCLA fans? I never run into UCLA fans. USC maybe, but UCLA, like, nobody. I don't ever run into UCLA fans.
No, I think we all agree that UCLA got into the Big Ten on USC's coattails.
Yeah,
and the Big Ten.
Yeah, that's a rivalry you can't split up, right?
Yeah, it's a rivalry. They wanted to keep it.
Yep.
USC needed a travel partner. Having one that's in the same city is pretty great for them.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think the Big Ten just wanted to scoop up every last drop of that LA market. Yeah. I mean, Oregon is in Eugene, like there's you could fit that entire city 1,000 times in LA. You know what I mean? Yeah. 10,000 times and not have to make it even equal out. So,
but I feel like there's more Oregon fans nationwide
100%
than 100%. UCLA because they're just cool. They've got the jerseys, they're Nike, like it's just they've kind of been the flashy team that everyone's kind of grown to love.
Here's where you get into the drama, right? Apparently, and this is speculation that I've read, but apparently USC didn't want to bring any other schools like Washington or Oregon, because they wanted to own the entire Pacific West.
Interesting.
For recruiting purposes. Now, there's more. Right.
That's very interesting.
There's more than enough talent to go around. The other side of that coin is that, Oregon and Washington didn't bring in enough value. They would have diluted the TV deal.
Yeah. So how much do you think travel is going to affect those teams? I mean, now USC, UCLA, they're going to have to get on a 5-hour flight, whereas Michigan's going to have to hop on a 40-minute flight to go play at Ohio State.
Yeah. So here's where I go contrarian. Like everyone's talking about, the travel, bro. It's a 5-hour flight tops, for kids that are in their peaks physically, 18 to 22.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to be flying private.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. And anyone who says it's a big deal is ridiculous.
Maybe it'll be a big deal for their scholastic activities, but let's be honest, most athletes aren't too worried about that, I don't think.
Yeah, it'll affect school, but
they'll have Wi-Fi on the plane. They'll get their homework done on the plane, or their TAs will be on there doing their homework for them.
Oh no, you're 100% right. We're 10 minutes in. We haven't even talked about school. Nobody cares about school. I want kids to get an education as much as the next guy, but when it comes to college football, they don't care.
So let's go deeper into BYU versus Utah here.
Yeah.
Utah was going to join the Big 12 potentially. I think that's over now. They're not going to do it. What is your take on that? What happened there?
I don't. I don't think it's over. I think it's on pause.
Okay. Would you like to, as a, I know you like both schools, but you kind of lean towards Utah. What would you like Utah to do at this point, given that USC and UCLA are leaving?
That's a great question. I've actually given this a lot of thought. The prime scenario for Utah and really the Big 12, I don't think the Pac-12 is in a bad spot. And even if the schools have reportedly decided to stay together and make it work with 10 teams. We all know they're just holding. Everyone, it was so crazy. There was so much speculation when everything happened about 3 weeks ago. Everyone's taking a pause. And that's kind of how realignment happens. It happens very slowly. One big move a year for the last 2 years, but before that, it was 10 years, So, I'll get back to your question, but what everyone's waiting on is Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And I don't think Notre Dame's going to make a move anytime soon. So
I don't either.
They have 4 years left on their NBC contract. The CFP has 4 years left on its contract.
Yep.
Well, I think Notre Dame is enjoying their newfound status as the prettiest girl on the dance floor.
Oh, they've got no incentive to join a conference right now.
Zero.
they get all the breaks by being independent and being Notre Dame. It's just like there's like
Absolutely.
built-in rules specifically for them that like favor them. Like they have zero incentive to join the conference, in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
they got tons of money from their own TV deal.
Yeah.
And anyway, go ahead.
But by nature, I'm a very impatient person, and I kind of just want this all to play out, just because it's fun and exciting, even if it's not necessarily good for college football. But I mean, good for Notre Dame, but man, it just all seems a little bit pompous to me. Join a conference, guys.
Yeah.
They're right now. They're making between 15 and 22 million a year. They had a backloaded contract, so they're making about 22 million a year right now.
Okay.
So a lot less than everyone else. And then they're trying to get from NBC on this next go around $75 million a year.
Wow.
If they can get that, they'll stay. They're okay with making less, but if they can get that, they'll stay independent and they won't do anything. I don't know how they get that playing the ACC. They're going to have to mix games up with the SEC and the Big Ten in order to get that type of revenue.
Yeah.
But again, until Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's the linchpin. Until they do something, I think college football is going to stay as is for at least another year, maybe the next 4 years until the CFP contract runs up or the NBC contract runs up.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't think even Notre Dame's going to get 75 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. To answer your question about Utah, again, the Pac-12 is lessened with how everything's gone down.
Yeah.
The Pac-12 without USC is just it's not the Pac anymore. You know what I mean? And say what you want about Utah, they're one of the best programs in the country.
Yeah.
Have been for the last 5 years. And if you watch them closely, their first 5 years in the Pac-12, they were getting their footing, but you saw the talent level on the field every single year.
Yeah.
And then once they caught up in the skilled positions, because they always had linemen, offensive and defensive linemen with the Polynesian pipeline they have here. Once everything else caught up, they're one of the winningest programs in the country in the last 5 years. They've been in 4, I think, Pac-12 championships, or 3 in the last 4 years, and they finally broke through and won one.
Yeah.
I mean, look what they did to Oregon last year. So they're there, but it doesn't matter when it comes to realignment. Like, so what do I want Utah to do? I'd love them to join the Pac-12 if they can get everyone else to come. If not, I'd rather them stay. Prime scenario that's actually realistic is we've all heard the talk, the Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, like that's probably going to happen at some point. I don't think the Pac-12 stays together. I think they're just waiting. When the next round of realignment happens, it's going to be so drastic because the Big 12 is probably going to make more money than the Pac-12 now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is insane to say, especially because the Big 12 doesn't have any brands like Washington or Oregon. Maybe Oklahoma State is on par with Washington, maybe. But
I think they are, but
yeah,
you'd know better.
Fair enough. But Oregon's the biggest brand out there, in the Western United States right now by far. So the Pac-12 has something going for them, but I think, but Oregon doesn't want to stay. Phil Knight's making calls, trying to get into the SEC or the Big Ten. He wants to get into the Big Ten. I at the end of the day, I think Oregon's too valuable of a property to not get into one of those Big 2 conferences.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. So realistically, I'd love to see Oregon, UW, Utah, Colorado, Arizona State. I'd love to see those 6 schools go into the Big 12. Get BYU and Utah back in the same conference.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I mean,
that's the best case scenario for us, for BYU and Utah fans. That's the best case scenario for the Big 12. Brett Yormark, the new commissioner, he's aggressive. I guarantee you, they say the calls have stopped. It's honest, but they've only stopped for now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because again, we're back in another waiting period like we were last year after Oklahoma and Texas left.
Yeah.
So I think that would be great. But when that happens, I mean, we might not see any more realignment for the next year or again until the next 4 years. Everything depends on Notre Dame and everything depends on the college football playoff and access. Like if schools don't have access to the playoff to compete for a national title, then they will leave.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's interesting the impact that this has on recruiting, right? Like you were saying, I mean, the Big Ten is just going to naturally get better athletes because the best people want to be on the biggest stage.
100%.
And so that's interesting that you mentioned they want to own that entire Pacific, coast, the West Coast of the United States. And then on top of that, you've got the NIL deals. So those are going to be even bigger for these kids now, in these bigger conferences. So recruiting is going to be interesting. So between Utah and BYU,
I don't think people realize how big of a deal this is going to be for a school like Utah, or even BYU, who's in the Big 12, who now Big 12 membership was great a year ago, and today it's even less than it was. You know what I mean? Pac-10 membership was great, but now it's even less. Like recruiting is going to go down for all those schools. Like SEC's already dominated recruiting. You're going to see the Big 10 take a big jump. Like kids want to be in those two conferences, then the ACC, everyone else minus maybe a Clemson and an Oregon will get the scraps of everything that's left.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. I don't think we'll see the effects in the next season or two. I think 3 years out, we'll definitely see what happens.
Yeah.
I think it's bad.
Yeah. That's good insights, my man. I want to talk real quick just about the upcoming season itself. Utah, BYU, who's going to have the better season? Are you sad they're not playing each other? Stuff like that.
Oh, I'm devastated they're not playing each other. I'm in the camp that BYU and Utah should play every year, no matter what.
It's like an absolute travesty that they don't play every year. It's a crime.
Travesty. Yeah. Well, not only is it a travesty, but it's exponentially worse this year because we're going into a year which Utah might have the best team they've ever had, and BYU might have one of the best teams they've ever had, and so we've got these incredible talents, at the quarterback position, at each school, running back position. I mean, the defense is offensive. I mean, we're both BYU and Utah are stacked with NFL talent. Yeah. When was the last time you said that about BYU? I mean, they've got 2 first-round linemen on their offensive line. I think it's Pro Football Focus. They have BYU ranked as a top 5 offensive line in college football. Yeah. Utah's getting love preseason from Phil Steele, who's His Holiness Phil Steele. He's nobody does college football better than him.
Yeah.
But he's got Utah's offensive and defensive line ranked 1. And then you look at the skill positions. Utah's finished, picked as a preseason top 10 team. BYU's anywhere from top 10 to top 15. This is a blessed time to be a fan of football in the state of Utah.
So let's do it. Let's go through. I've got Utah's schedule pulled up. I'm going to say the opponent. You're going to say win or loss. Ready?
I'm going to say win or loss, but I reserve the right to make an adjustment at the end.
Okay. Florida.
I think we win that game. I think it's going to be tough. Excuse me. Florida is one of about, 12 to 13 teams that have recruited more 4- and 5-star recruits in the last 5 years than they have 2- or 3-star recruits.
Insane. Yeah, you sent me that graphic the other day on Instagram.
Yeah. So they've got so much talent. What they lack is leadership, but they just have a new coaching staff. So I think Utah sent more players to the NFL because there's nobody better in the country at developing talent and getting them to the NFL than Utah. They own that space in college football, which is why they've done so well, and kids are starting to know it, which is why their recruiting is shot up.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a fantastic game. I'm excited to see how Utah does versus SEC speed on the outside. So, but I think Utah pulls it out.
Okay. SUU.
It's gonna be a tough one, but I think Utah makes it.
Okay. San Diego State.
It's a revenge game for Utah, and they're playing at Utah. I think Utah's going to smoke them.
Arizona State.
Utah will win that one. Hey, look, Arizona State always plays Utah tough, but they have so much turmoil. They lost their quarterback; he transferred out, so I think Utah beats ASU.
Okay, Oregon State.
Oregon State they might be the one team with a better offensive line than Utah, depending on who you look at preseason rankings. it fluctuates between Oregon State, and Utah as number one. Utah will win it. That's another revenge game. They're playing in Salt Lake this year.
There.
I think that's going to be the difference maker.
Okay, so you've got them at 5-0. UCLA at UCLA.
And see, that's a sleeper game for me. UCLA's record hasn't been great the last several years, but if again, like Utah, the first 5 years in the pack, what Chip Kelly's been doing over there is fantastic. They didn't have enough players when he got there to fill an entire roster. That's how bad things were at UCLA. Wow. And now they've got so much talent going through there, and they're still kind of figuring out how to win, but Chip Kelly knows how to win. Chip Kelly knows how to recruit. Like, you're seeing the difference on the field. That's a sleeper game. If Utah always drops a game that they're not supposed to, Utah should win this game. I'm gonna give it to Utah, but I might at the end change my mind. But I'm gonna give that one to Utah.
Okay, so that's one to look at. USC at home. So it's Utah. Yeah, it's here in Salt Lake.
I'm gonna give that to Utah.
Okay, 7-0. This is big.
That's gonna be the one.
I'm curious if you're gonna say they're gonna lose one. So we're at 7-0.
So here's the thing. Utah will lose one game between UCLA and USC. I don't know which one, but they're gonna lose one of those two.
Okay.
That's Utah's good. They're good enough they should be 12-0, but that's not what Utah does. They're going to drop two somewhere. I'll pick them to win against UCLA. I'll pick them to beat USC at home. I think they're pissed off, but this is a different USC team with Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison. They have 13 starters that came in through the transfer portal. Like, this team's stacked. Most of those transfers came in on offense, though, so their defense is still suspect, and Utah's offense is going to be a juggernaut this year. So, and then getting him at home, I think, makes the difference.
Okay, let's cruise through these last few. Washington State.
They'll be Washington State.
Arizona.
They'll be Arizona.
Oregon at Oregon. Oh wait, I skipped Stanford. Sorry, Stanford first, then Oregon.
They'll beat Stanford.
Okay, and then Oregon at Oregon.
I think they'll drop. Well, that's the last game of the year.
No, they got Colorado last game of the year.
Oregon at Oregon. That if they lose one, I think that's what they're going to do. They'll beat Colorado. Utah's not going to go undefeated. I think they lose one between USC and UCLA. I think they beat Oregon too, but they're going to lose one other dumb game. I think they go 10-2. Okay. But right now we're looking at it on paper, and on paper Utah goes 11-1, 12-0, but they're gonna finish the season 10-2.
Okay, 10-2 for Utah, and then we've only got a few minutes left, so I want to try and cruise through BYU's. Much easier schedule for BYU, but let's go through it real quick. South Florida.
That's a win. Tough, but it's a win.
Baylor at home.
Baylor lost a lot of talent to the NFL. It's in Provo. I'm giving that to BYU. Revenge game.
Okay, Oregon at Oregon.
I'm going to give that one to Oregon.
Okay.
If they had them home, that Oregon team is stacked.
Yeah, I agree. That's a tough game.
Yeah.
Wyoming.
They'll beat Wyoming.
Utah State.
That's a win. That's going to be fun. That's the last game they play for a while.
And that's always a good rivalry. It's a good in-state rivalry. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I'll be watching that game. That's going to be fun.
Okay, and here's a big one, Notre Dame. And it's in Vegas, I believe.
It's in Vegas. I don't know how the tickets allotment worked out. I know they're sold out for BYU. I don't know who it's going to be a home game for, because we know that Las Vegas is a home game for BYU or Utah if they go.
Yeah.
I think it might be 50-50. There might even be more Notre Dame fans. I think Notre Dame's going to win that one. Notre Dame's competing for a playoff this year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got now 1, 2, 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, 4-2. You've got BYU so far. 4-2. Arkansas at home.
I think they'll be which is cool. They'll beat an SEC team in Provo, which is fun.
Yeah. Liberty. Give me liberty or give me death.
Death for Liberty.
East Carolina.
They'll win that game.
Boise State at Boise State.
See, that's going to be fun. That's another team that's become a rival since BYU has been independent. It's been one of the funnest games of the year, especially for us. I think they win that game, but that's another game we're going to lose, which is sad.
Yeah. Okay. So what are we? 3 losses now, and then Utah.
I think we're only at 2.
You had Notre Dame and Oregon and Boise State.
No, they're going to beat Boise State.
Oh, they're going to beat Boise State. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I misunderstood that.
No worries.
Okay, and then I don't even know who this is. Utah Tech? What the heck is that?
That's SUU. Is it SUU?
That's their name now?
They changed their name to be politically correct because they were the Rebels. Dixie. It's Dixie. It's Dixie State.
Oh, it's Dixie. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's Dixie, not SUU. So,
the
Rebels it was tough for the students. The Rebels represent the Confederate rebels, and we all know that we can't apparently
Utah Tech.
I grew up in Utah. I didn't know that, so apparently that's a thing. So now they're Utah Tech.
Okay, well, BYU will win that one by 100, so we'll just skip that one. Yeah. Stanford, last game of the season.
Stanford could be good. Stanford could be horrible, but BYU beats them. BYU was good this year.
So both teams going 10-2.
I think both teams are going 10-2, which makes it even worse that they're not playing this year.
What a shame.
I've got both teams going 10-2.
Maybe the college football gods will smile upon us and give us another bowl game matchup.
Well, see, I don't think it's going to happen. I think Utah's going to go to the Pac-12 championship. Yeah. Here's the fun part, though. You ready for this?
Yep.
We know that it just changed. They're not taking the top team in each division. It's going to be the two teams with the top winning percentage. So basically, two best teams.
Yep.
So we might see another Pac-12 or another matchup between Utah and USC in the Pac-12 championship. Yeah. Which is, I don't think Utah's beaten USC twice. They're not going to do to USC what they did to Oregon.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley's too good. So and Caleb Williams is going to be a Heisman candidate this year. So
yep. It's going to be fun, Alan. We have like 2 minutes left. I want to touch on. I told you in advance I was going to bring this in. NBA talk. A very loyal listener, James Schramm, had this to say, and I want you to react to it with me. So let's have a listen here.
Okay.
Hey, Sean. James Schramm here. Longtime listener, first-time caller. I actually disagree with you on the picks that Danny Ainge has been getting, and that he will probably get for Donovan as well. I think picks are super valuable, not necessarily for actually in the draft. I think you can pick your spots on when you want to be able to use these picks, but to be able to trade them, I think they're great. A lot of teams really value picks in the future because they've already traded. For example, the Lakers have no picks. They would love to get up some picks now because they got nothing. They got no tradable assets. And so if we look back at the KG Paul Pierce trade, that benefited the Celtics for years to come and has been arguably one of the best trades in the history of what they actually ended up getting back over 2, 3, 4 years after that trade, even 5 years later after that trade with all the picks that they got. So I think Danny Ainge is actually doing a good job in the rebuild.
Okay, so there you have it. So James, he makes a good point there that you can take those draft picks and you can then trade them away yourself. What's your take on getting rid of guys like Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, and getting essentially just draft picks?
Let me answer that with a question of my own for you. With that current roster, with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell as Utah's best players, were they ever going to win a championship?
They should have been in the finals in place of Phoenix last year, but they blew it. So to me, it was a leadership issue, not a player personnel issue.
Would they ever win it? Would they ever win a title? Would they ever be NBA champions? With those, if Donovan and Rudy are your best players, are you winning an NBA title?
If the injury stars align for you, like it did for Toronto when they won their title, or even kind of like it did for so in other words, it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's really not.
I feel like you're trying hard not to say no.
Well, the answer is no, unless things like that happen, and they do happen. There's so many teams that get titles because of injuries, and even the Bucks title, like they kind of just benefited from some injuries.
But everyone does every single year, right? I don't think Utah ever wins a title with Donovan and Rudy as your best players. They're great players, they're all stars, but they're not good enough to win a title. And so, and Utah, the ugly truth is we're not going to get any. Kevin Durant and all these awesome free agents aren't coming to Utah to play for reasons 1 through 10. We could talk about on a whole other podcast.
But that's kind of my point, because I don't disagree with you that Rudy and Donovan were not good enough to win a title unless the injury stars aligned, like I said. But to trade them away for draft picks for what? So you can draft more guys that you'll lose after
Here's
they
the,
hit
here's
their
the
prime?
thing. In Danny Ainge, I trust. Like, he's already done it before. That's how we built.
I mean, that's James's argument, is that Danny Ainge can do it.
Yeah. If there's anyone in the NBA who can do it, it's someone who's already done it the exact same way.
But has he done it? Like, he's in one of the most favored markets in the entire world for basketball. And what do they have to show for it? They got one title in 2008. And so what has he really done?
I mean, hey,
drafted a super team to a massive market with the most history in the entire NBA, and they got one title. Okay.
I put him second to the Lakers. Hey, if you're a Jazz fan, you're taking one title. Like, if all we
but
ever
we can't attract those guys. You have to trade for those guys. You have to trade an all-star for another all-star. You don't trade it for draft picks. That's my opinion. Like, you got a 3-time or 4-time, whatever he is, defensive player of the year. You've got a 4-time all-star in Donovan Mitchell, and we're going to get draft picks for it.
I mean, you look at the Warriors, they were winning titles through the draft. They were winning titles before they drew Kevin Durant and after he left. You know what I mean?
No, but my point is, all of our guys that we draft that become all-stars, we can't hang on to them. They leave. And so you have to bring in like a guy that's already in his prime.
We can get that.
Sell the farm to get Kevin Durant. He's on the trade block. He's under contract for 4 years. Give up Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. Get Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant, without those two on Jazz's roster, we're also not going to win.
You can surround him with guys. By the way, we've only got 40 seconds left, so we got to wrap up. But
no, I think it's a good thing what Danny Ainge is doing.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I think this next year is going to be a sorry year for the Jazz.
It'll match their new sorry uniforms that they have.
To me, it's like as they said on Remember the Titans, attitude reflects leadership, Captain. We've got ownership, GM, coach, not really leading the way, and therefore you get guys like Rudy and Donovan butting heads, and the whole team falls apart. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Quinn Snyder was a hell of a leader. I just think it was those guys were like Kobe and Shaq, just not as good. They couldn't figure it out.
That's a fair point. All right, we got to sign off. Love you, bro. Good chatting with you.
You too, brother. Thanks, man.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are